Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. 4 years ago, as a candidate for the first political office of my life, I promised voters that I would always tell them the truth, even if it made them mad. I believe in a republic, every elected official's duty is to cut through the self-interested talking points. Our job is to seek the truth and to speak the truth. That is how I approach every bill, and I approach this one no differently. I respect and love every one of you in this body. I mean that, from the bottom of my heart. And if you have followed that process and reached different conclusions, I will still respect you, and I look forward to partnering with you on many more legislative fights to come. But this issue is too important for me to not get up here today and share the truth as I see it after many hours of objectively pursuing it. My bottom line is that after considering all the arguments offered in support of mid-cycle gerrymandering, I see no justification that outweighs the harms it would inflict upon the people's faith in the integrity of our elections and our system of government. Some say we should gerrymander now because Democrats have been doing it for years, and it's time for Republicans to catch up. That would be a sensible question to ask 4 years ago, and or 4 years in the future. During the regular redistricting process. But since Washington, D.C. is pushing that question on us now, let's answer it now. Is one side behind in the gerrymandering arms race? The best metric to measure that is to simply add all the votes for Congress across the nation and then to compare that percentage with how power is actually distributed. If one side was more successful at gerrymandering, there would be a mismatch between those two numbers. But that isn't the case. Nationwide, Republicans won 51% of all the votes for Congress, and they won 51% of the seats. Undeniably, there are multiple states with corrupt-looking maps and Democrat strongholds, but this data shows Republicans have fully offset those maps in subtler, classier ways. Another justification for mid-cycle gerrymandering is simply that we don't want Republicans to lose power. I, like a supermajority of you, do not want to see another Democrat Speaker of the House. But that isn't for me to decide. And it isn't for anyone in this body to decide either. Living in a free constitutional republic means we empower voters to make those decisions and we accept their will no matter what. And this accountability makes us better. It makes us more transparent, it sharpens our messages, and it improves our capacity to govern. No one benefits when we shield those who hold power from the will of the voters. Over the long run, this accountability keeps us relevant and it keeps us in power. I understand and do not dispute that our current laws allow mid-cycle gerrymandering, but the same can arguably be said of court packing to rig judicial outcomes. While both packing a court and packing a congressional district are technically constitutional, neither is in keeping with the spirit or principles of the Constitution. Both are wrong, and both are in violation of the spirit of 1776 and 1787. As a conservative, I want to maintain the moral standing to condemn both. And for those of you from around the country tuning in today for the first time, make no mistake, I, like many of those who will join me in voting no today, are constitutional, fiscal, and religious conservatives. What that means to me is that I believe in conserving the values, the culture, and the institutions that created American exceptionalism. I have no problem telling you what a woman is and that men should not be playing in female sports. From this very floor, I've authored and passed higher ed reform legislation that today is the nightmare of left-wing activist professors. And over the last 3 years, and before it was popular to do so, I have repeatedly condemned the excesses of the IEDC. These values and votes have earned me a 100% rating from the Americans for Prosperity and a 100% rating from Indiana Family Institute, as I have earned every year I have been here. My point is that my opposition to mid-cycle gerrymandering is not in contrast with my conservative principles. My opposition is driven by them. The power to draw election maps is a sacred responsibility directly tied to the integrity of our elections and the people's faith in our constitutional system. Normalizing mid-cycle gerrymandering would create a culture in which a political party could select new voters not once a decade, but any time it feared the consequences of an approaching election. The history of power teaches us that elected officials will take any path available to them to protect their position. Imagine a moderate Speaker of the House who passes a controversial legislation that attracts primary challengers to him and his caucus. Imagine a principled but pesky member of a legislative body that pushes back against leadership and refuses to play by the rules of the majority caucus. It is not far-fetched that in either scenario, the incumbent powers of the legislative branch could use off-cycle gerrymandering to defeat their opponents without a single election. Why, as conservatives, would we give the mapmakers this power? Any elected office, from the US Congress to school board, could fall prey to this culture. Such a shift would make it harder for the people to hold their elected officials accountable, and it would erode our trust in elections. Speaking of election integrity, this map, drawn primarily by somebody not from here, gerrymanders so aggressively that it splits precincts across the state. The Republican Election Board staff member in my county, with 40 years of experience, tells me he would swear before a court of law that it's not that some Hoosiers might get the wrong ballot, it's that some Hoosiers will get the wrong ballot. And that is true across the state. That's because in my neighborhood, the bill uses dated precinct boundaries and carves up precincts with peninsulas as small as football fields. Thousands of voters in my township will need to be manually assigned a ballot, and mistakes will be made. That is not what conservatives stand for, nor do we believe that the federal government should have the ability to dictate by threat or other means what should happen in our state. We are a co-equal force of government, or at least we are supposed to be. And as long as I have breath, I will use my voice to resist a federal government that attempts to bully, direct, and control this state or any state. Giving the federal government more power is not conservative, nor is the idea that any single election or branch of the government should determine the fate of the country. One of our worst presidents of all time, Woodrow Wilson, pushed the idea that America should be more like a parliamentary system in which a party could enact an aggressive agenda by winning a single election with a small majority. But for the last 100 years, constitutional conservatives have been fighting this left-wing idea by standing up for the principle of separation of powers and federalism. As long as we stay true to the Constitution, no single election result will determine the destiny of the nation. Fighting fire with fire burns the world down. The way you fight fire is with its opposite. Doubling down on our constitutional principles and the Indiana way of doing politics are the water we need. Some say Indiana doesn't know what time it is, but I think we know exactly what time it is. It's time for patriots to stand by the Constitution and say, we, the people of the United States, are the only ones who should ever decide an election. It's time to say no to pressure from Washington, D.C. It's time to say no to removing accountability from elected officials. It's time to say no to outsiders who are trying to run our state. It's time to say no to HB 1032. And I ask you to join me in doing so.
Thanks, Senator.